Welcome back to another video where we talk about designing a tabletop sports game. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to go, but I'm just going to jump into it and see where see where it goes. Hopefully, it doesn't lead to a bunch of rambling. Um, I wanted to sort of show or give an experience of what I talked about a little bit in part number 2, which was about you know building detail into the game. Um, I talked about the fact that, the most basic game would be pick a winner, pick a loser, right? Roll for a winner, roll for a loser. And so I want to sort of explore that concept a little bit and maybe just show what actually happens if you're using dice. This is a little bit different if you're using like playing cards or something like that. But many of the games that you build for sports are based off of dice rolls, and trying to figure out which dice are the right ones to use and that kind of stuff is a little bit of a um, just takes some time and effort and sort of thinking through the math. Um, but learning how to proportion the dice rolls, how to advantage or disadvantage one team over another. Um, there are concepts for that, and you've played with them, you've used them. Why does this guy have an extra advantage? And then what does that actually mean in terms of real and hard numbers? The only way kind of to know that is to do it. So that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to create our first game. This is sort of the most basic. In part 2, we talked about the most basic game is find the score, right? That's probably the most basic game that you can do. So I have two baseball teams, the Braves and Washington. This is I'll be using numbers from yesterday. They're playing. I think they have one more game in the series today. So Atlanta is actually at Washington as I record this. And so I'm going to use their actual stats, and that's going to come in a little bit later on the phone. But right now, let's just do the most basic um, game that we can create. And so for Atlanta to win, we're going to say 1 to 50. And for Washington to win, we're going to say 51 to 100. And yes, I'm using pen and paper. I advise that you do this at the beginning, especially as you're learning and as you're beginning to create the game. If you get to the computer too early, you start to invest too much time into your idea. And really, that should be the place where you make things reproducible on the computer. Unless you just already know the idea, you've done it somewhere else, and you just want to port that to a different sport or something like that, then you don't have to necessarily go through all this because you theoretically did it somewhere else, and you're just trying to port this sport over, and then you can make those adjustments and add features and stuff like that. But I highly encourage you to use paper. You know, whenever whenever I'm doing things, I'm keeping score on paper. This was to keep the four downs for the football game, and then you got a little marker there you can move. So I highly encourage pen and paper. That's something in my profession as a designer, as a developer. Pen and paper is the fastest way to get your idea down on, so that you can use it, so that you can begin to test it. So we're gonna just sort of have a pen and paper here and sort of go through this. It's going to be easier to show as well on the camera, which is important for me in this moment. So we have Atlanta at Washington, a 1 to 50. So uh, we're gonna roll two D100 rolls. So I do have a D100 that I'm going to use in conjunction with a D10 to get a number between 1 and 100. Now that's going to be, we're going to roll 1. I'm sorry, not 2. So we're just going to roll one time. And if the number is 1 to 50, then Atlanta is going to, actually, we should say, mm, No, we can do. Yeah, we can do one. Okay, we can do one. We'll get to any sort of caveats if we need to with zeros and stuff like that. My dice don't have tens; they have zeros, so there might need to be a caveat there. So 1 to 50 is going to be a win for Atlanta. 51 to 100 is going to be a win for Washington. Now, this is a straight up 50-50 roll. These dice are not loaded. They're just regular old dice. So this is my D10 and this is my D100. And you can see, it's got everything marked on here. So we're going to use this as the 10 and we're going to use this as the ones place. So for instance, that would be a 93. Okay, so 90 plus 3. So that's how we're going to do this. And let's just roll out 10 games. I like to do a nice round number, especially 10s, 50s, because then it makes it easier to do percentages. But if you have a calculator handy, it's just as easy to do those percentages as well. So theoretically, what should happen in our game is each team should win 5 games apiece. If we roll 10, they should each get 5 wins. So that's the theory. And if you roll enough games out, you should get to even Steven, right? You roll a million games, it should come out 50-50. That's the theory. So let's test that theory. First is 45, so that's a win for the Braves. Game number 2, 99, that's a win for Washington. Game number 3, 48, win for the Braves. Okay, and a win for Washington. So far, our theory is holding here. They're 2-2 after 4 games. The tie-breaking game is a 50, and so that goes to Atlanta. Lost my dice here. So let's roll that one again. And that will be a 66. That goes to Washington. So after 6 games, we are 3-3. That's a 20. That's to Atlanta. 94 goes to Washington. 68 goes to Washington. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 9. And let's see if it holds true with Atlanta. And it does, a 26. So you can see 50-50 split. This is perfect, right? So what happens is each team has a 50% chance of winning. 1 to 50 is 50%. 51 to 100 is 50%. And when you roll 2 dice at 50% odds, it should happen like this. It won't always. Sometimes it'll be 6-4. Sometimes it'll be 7-3. Sometimes it'll be 6-4 or 7-3 the other way. But if you roll enough games, it should always come out 50-50. Now, let's add some sort of modifier. Let's give Atlanta so they're obviously the better team. They're first in their division. Washington is last in their division. So let's give Atlanta a plus 10% advantage. So that means instead of 1 to 50, then it is a 1 to 60 is going to be a win for them. And then Washington can only win with a 61 to 100. So that's a 10% boost to the Braves. And let's see how that affects the scoring. Let's see how that affects everything with them. So game 1 goes to Atlanta. Game 2 to Atlanta. We haven't seen the advantage come into play yet, but we see it there. Okay, so that's the advantage roll, right? 52 should have gone to Washington, but instead that roll goes to Atlanta. So after 3, they're 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. Finally, Washington wins 1, 5-1. Atlanta again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1. That's 7 games. That goes to Washington, 7-2. 59, 59 again. That's 2 wins that Washington should have had that they didn't have. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got one more. And a 54. Okay, that's another win that Washington had. So let's just make note of that. There are 3 wins that Washington should have had, but instead all of those wins go to the ATL. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2. They should have been 5 and 5. It should have come out exactly like this, but instead we had 3 wins that should have gone to Washington that instead got ported over to Atlanta. Okay, so that's how advantage works. So you're giving a team an advantage by just 10%, and that causes a shift. Instead of 5 and 5, now the teams are 8 and 2. Okay, so that's a pretty sizable shift, and you're going to notice with even just a 10% shift in things that it will move the needle quite a bit. Just 10%, just a 10% advantage. So maybe a +1 out of on a D10 roll. So instead of 3, it becomes a 2 or something like that. So even just changing the number, because that's a 10% chance that you've either added or subtracted, will make a huge difference in the final results of whether it's a full game like this and you're choosing the winner, or whether it's on an individual part of the play where maybe you're deciding on something that happened in the play itself. So advantage and disadvantage in the game. And you can see that I didn't need to necessarily disadvantage. I didn't need to punish Washington 2. I just needed to pump up or advantage Atlanta. And I had showed this before with the advantage roll here in the football game that I did. You can see that I didn't punish New York for being a bad team, but what I did is I rewarded Tampa Bay for being a good team. They're in the top 10 in both defense and offense. So on the advantage roll, which is a 2d10s, I just roll those 2d10s against each other. Instead of a 50-50 chance, now I have a 60-40 chance. And that makes all the difference in the advantage roll because now New York they have to overcome. So if it's even, they lose. If they win the roll by 1, they lose because in my game the tie goes to the offense. So it becomes almost a +2 advantage in some ways because they have to win the roll by +2 because they're already disadvantaged. Defense is already disadvantaged in the game anyway because on a tie it goes to the offense. So I could just as easily make that an advantage to the defense so that Tampa Bay would have to tie to be able to get that advantage. So that's up to you. That's part of what you want to do, right? I want more offense in the game, or I feel like more offense is warranted or needed. So offense wins on a tie. In the event of a tie, you could just as easily just roll again so that nobody has an advantage on a tie. But I kind of like, not having to just be re-rolling all the time. So I created that as an advantage to a better team. But I had also gone through and I had made this like a -1 if they were a bad team. And it turned out that that was too harsh an advantage and too harsh a disadvantage because essentially in instances you're like at a -2 disadvantage at 20% disadvantage. Are they at a 20% disadvantage on every single play? Probably not. Are they at a 20% advantage overall? Probably, right? The Giants from last year to the Buccaneers from last year. So, you're sort of like trying to work these things out. You're trying to figure out like what's especially if you're going for some sort of realism, what's a realistic advantage and a disadvantage, right? And here you might say, well, Brian, that's only 10 rolls. That sample size is too small. Okay, right? So just to sort of prove the point, and I'll show you this in just a minute as well. So just to prove the point, I made a little application here, and the application every time you reload, it plays a game. Okay, so the home team won that one, the away team wins that one, away team again, home team again. Okay, so every time it runs a roll, 1 to 100. 1 to 50 is a visiting team win. 51 to 100 is the home team win. Okay. So I'm going to go back into the back end of it, and I'm going to make a few changes. This is the code that runs. It runs just one time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a change here, and I'm going to run it 10 times. And it's saved. And let's go to, did it save? Let's see. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to rerun our games. Okay, so now it runs a script 10 times, 10 rolls, and then applies the win either to the visitor or to the home team. So hopefully you can see that on the screen well enough. So here you can see that the visiting team won 4 games, the home team won 6 games. Now this is playing everything straight up, 50-50, right? So in the back end, we can see that if the result of the roll is greater than 50, so 51 to 100, 100 is our roll. So the roll is from 1 to 100. So if the result is greater than 50, then it's going to go to the home team. If the result is less than 50, otherwise, it's going to go to the visiting team. Okay, so a roll of 50 or more is going to go to the home team. Okay, so 6-4, that's after 10 games. 7-3 now is after 20 games. So then that's 6-4. So that's 11 wins for the visiting team, and 9 wins for the home team right after 20. So 11 and 9. And then here is 15 and 15. Okay, so after 30 games, dead even, right? So you can see that in a smaller sample size, you might come out with less than 50-50. But the idea overall is if you played enough games, then it is going to sort of come out to 50-50. That's the whole point. So if you're figuring out, you want an even roll, just give every team a 50-50 chance. And if you hated fractions in school or you hated percentages in school, if you're going to be doing games like this, then you're going to have to learn to deal with it, right? This is what the games are based off of if you're using dice to figure out how to advantage or disadvantage different players, different teams, whatever it is. This is how you figure it out, is you shift the percentage of the roll. Now I'm doing 1 to 100. That makes it super easy because that's what a percentage is based off of, right? And those are things you need to think about too. What kind of dice do I want to use? How difficult do I want to make these dice? Do I want to use D10s, which are common? Do I want to use D6s, which are common? Do I want to use D8s, which are a little less common? I have a game with a D9 that I mostly use on the web application because a D9 is not easy to come by, right? So you just have to think about those things. But the D9 works perfectly because there are 9 positions on the field. So it does work perfectly, and there's a lot of division. There's a lot of threes in baseball. So 9 works well with threes, right? There are 3 outs. There are 3 balls before you get to the strike. There are 27 outs, which are divided by 3, into 9 innings. 9 is divided by 3. So there's a lot of threes in baseball. And so a D9 makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, so back to our example here. So we have this example here showing. Now let's do it on a larger scale. So we're doing 10. Let's do 100. Okay, so let's just Let's just simulate 100 games, and that's essentially what we're doing. We're just simulating 100 games, or we're simulating how many games. So after 100 games, 58 and 42, right? 42 to the visitors, 58 to the home team. After 200 games, it's 50-50, so 92 and 108. Will they come back around? So 55, that's 142, 147, and 153. Okay, so they come a little bit closer to each other. So you can see that if you play enough games, you're going to come out to basically a 50-50 percentage. Now, if we go ahead and I'm belaboring the point here just to make the point because this is teaching, right? This teachers belabor the point. Okay, so after 1,000 games, 485 and 515. And if we do another 1,000 games, come on, 470. So do some math on camera, and 955 to 530. So 5, 4, and 10. So 1,045 to 955. So basically 100 games separated, or 1%. I'm sorry, 10% separates them. If we did it again, 486, you can see that it doesn't get Atlanta much closer, if at all. So 13, 14, 10, 14, 9, 5, and 15. 15, 59. So that gets them a little bit closer, gets them within 90, 95. So where they were at over 100. So you can see that the games are coming out about even. Now, this is if you're rolling 1,000 games, or this is actually what, 3,000 games. So that is still not going to get you 50-50. So this might be the actual percentage that you want. The problem is it could just as easily go the way of Atlanta as going the way of Washington, because they're not even, or they are even. So it could just as easily go one way or the other. Just like here, the home team has the advantage. Here, the away team had the advantage. So you're not creating any advantage. These two teams are definitely not equal in terms of their ability to win over 3,000 games. So over 3,000 games, these two teams play. Washington is not going to win this many games because Atlanta is just overall a better team, and not just overall a better team, but a significantly better team. So they're at a 626 winning percentage. Washington's at a 344 this year. 97 games they've won, 53 Washington has won. So they're a significantly better team. Now, how do we translate that into what we're doing? And one of the ways is by giving them an advantage. So let's go drop this back down to 100 just because. And if the result we need to change is greater, so just like we did here, if it's greater than 60, so now we give Atlanta their 10% advantage. So if it's greater than 60, then the home team is going to win, which is exactly what we set up here. But we only did it with 10 games here. Now let's take a look if we run 100 games. Now, it's the beauty of these simulations to be able to do that. So you can see here, this should be the exact, this is exactly how it should be. So it's 60 to 40 because we've given them a 10% advantage, right? So out of 100 games, it actually should be 60-40. This is the theoretical records that should be there. So great job, computer. Thank you for doing that. If we run 200 games, then we got 58. So 58. So 118 to 42 is 82, right? So 118 to 82. Again, this is almost dead even. It should be 120 to 80. Okay, so it's almost dead even at 60-40 split again. This is exactly what we would expect if we gave Atlanta a 60-40 advantage. If you run it again, you get a 60-40 split again. So 60 and 40 would put them within whatever. So it theoretically should be 180 to 120, but it's really 122 because of these two games here that it sort of deviated from the expectation, which is going to happen. Washington's going to win two games that they shouldn't over a span of 300 games. But overall, the advantage now is clearly in a 60-40 split for Atlanta because we've given them that, that 10% advantage. Now, you're not going to see that advantage play out to 60-40 over 10 games, but you don't build the game. I don't build the game so that you're going to get the 60-40 split every time. They're not going to go 6-4 against Washington every time that you play 10 games between the two. But the numbers behind how you get to the score theoretically should be 6-4 every time these two play 10 games. Atlanta should win 6, Washington should win 4. Now, the reality is, that's not it. The reality is Atlanta should win 62 out of every 100. And Washington should lose 34 out of every 100 because that's what their real scores are. Now, if you add those two together, you know that you get 96. So what the heck happened with the 4 games in between, right? That's a good question. And maybe in those 4 games, that's where you're going to get sort of the seesaw. Maybe there's an evenness to those two teams in the 4 games, and they could go either way. That's sort of how real sport works. So when I build a game personally, I'm building a game out of possibility. That's why I'm going to use splits like this of 60-40. I'm going to bump them up. And some people really want me to bump this up to like 30%. Because realistically, Atlanta is twice as good as Washington as far as by their record. But what I'm telling you is it's a little bit like two things starting out from the same place. And well, I guess put them side by side. So two teams starting out from the same place. And as they go out, one is going in one direction and one is going in the other direction. And they don't seem like they're going very far apart from each other. But as you see, this gap keeps widening. So even though this 10% seems like a small amount to advantage a team, the realistic possibility that if you start these two teams too far apart from one another, and now when they go out, one is trending up and one is going down. If you start them too far apart, then out here, it's an unrealistic distance between the two teams. If you start them out with just a little bit of advantage, over a short amount of time, you're not going to see much difference between the two teams. That is true. But baseball's a long season. That's why they play 162 games. Something else to think about. How many games are you going to be playing? How many games is a season? How many games constitutes like the fullness of your game? Are guys going to be playing, or girls, are people going to be playing 162 games? Are they going to be playing a football season where maybe it ends right here? And so your two teams may need to be a little bit farther apart because you need them to be this distance apart at the end, right? This is sort of the end of the season where baseball just keeps going on. And if you make them too far apart after 162, then that's sort of unrealistic. And you wind up, with this team with 5 wins, which is just not even real in baseball. Nobody winds up with 5 wins at the end of the year. And nobody ends up with 150 wins at the end of the year. So you sort of put them too far apart from one another. But here, you're thinking about the end. And if you're in football, you're thinking about an end after 16 games, right? So maybe in football, you do need to distance those teams a little bit more from one another because after only 17 games, you need this sort of split. So at the beginning, maybe their split needs to be a little bit farther apart from the good teams and the bad teams, because you're going to see one team, win 12 games, and you are going to see one team win one game or two games. So there needs to be quite a split in football. So thinking about your sport, thinking about how many games people are going to play within a season, and then you've got to find some balance there. So the expectation when I build a baseball game is that someone's going to play 162 games. So I need to build these teams as if they are on a 162 game schedule or on a 162 game scale. And maybe the games that you've been playing are not built for that. Maybe the games you've been playing are built for playing a World Series, or they're built for playing a playoff run, but they're not really built for 162 games, because then maybe you wind up like this where they're a little bit too far apart from one another. Or worse, maybe they're built a little bit too close to one another. And so the difference at the end of the season is not as great as it should be. I would guess that most games that you play are built for a 162 game schedule. It's meant for you to play out the games. Excuse me. It's meant for you to, at least with one team, to play out their entire schedule. That way, you get a fair assessment of that team against all the other teams in the league. And that really creates the most realistic opportunity to reproduce, you know, the results that you see at the end, which is not the goal. But if you aim for reproducing it, you're going to get pretty close. And that deviation at the end, which comes from rolling dice over and over and over again, which comes from lucky chances and situations and pitchers who came in to pitch who didn't pitch in real life, or maybe they pitched more, or injuries that happen on the tabletop that didn't happen in real life, or vice versa. Those sorts of things are variables that cannot necessarily be controlled. All you can control as a game designer is if everything is played as it should be for the 162 games, it should come out to a 60-40 split. This team should win theoretically 60, and this should win 40 every 100 games that they play against each other. So that's the best you can do as a designer, and you got to kind of leave the rest up to fate and chance, because that's what we're doing. We're when we use dice, we're leaving it all up to chance. When you use cards, you're leaving it up to the shuffle. So there's really no way to get around that. But kind of in a baseball game, there is skill, but there's also a lot of luck. I mean, teams lose 5 in a row. Atlanta could lose to Washington 3 games in a row because Washington got, 12 flares over second base, little dinks and dumps and that kind of stuff against Atlanta Aces. Baseball does play itself out to a little bit of luck, because Atlanta is one of the best teams in the majors this year, definitely in the National League, but they've lost 59 games, right? Or not 59. How many have they lost? That's the Yankees. They've lost 58 games. So that's a good chunk of games. That's half of their games that they've lost. Not quite half, 40% of their games that they've lost. So there's a lot of failure in baseball. And if you create this too wide, you're creating too much success for one team. If you create it too wide, you're creating too much failure for the other team, because they have won 53 games and they have beaten Atlanta. And so they haven't done well, in this series. I think they've only won 4 games against Atlanta in the 15 or so that they played. But they have beaten Atlanta. They have been close to beating Atlanta just in the last couple of days. So you have to provide the possibility, and a relatively realistic possibility, for Washington to win a game and for Atlanta to lose a game. Now, over the course of time, as the season goes on and gets out into here, that possibility to lose a game, over time, Atlanta should win 60% of their games against Washington, just based off of our rolls. Okay. All right, so that is belaboring the point, but hopefully that helps you to understand how you can manipulate things. Hopefully it helps people understand why I only manipulate things a little bit. The difference between Atlanta and Washington, it might only be 10%. Quite honestly, it's really probably about 15%. But that's not much of a difference between these two teams. You're talking about the top and the bottom of the National League. There are no teams worse than Washington, and there is only one team better than uh, Atlanta. They're tied with New York right now. So there's only one team better than them. So you're talking about the very top of the league. You're talking about the very bottom of the league. And a 10% difference puts them at about the right place that they should be. It should be a 60-40 split between these two teams. Really, uh, if you did plus 15%, that would probably put them in the right place. But it's actually really like 1 to 62, 1 to 64 or so. But if you did 1 to 65, I think that would give you the correct outcomes. And then if it was 66 to 100, that would probably be about the right space. But you're only talking about a 15% difference between the very top of the league and the very bottom. And this is part of pro sports. So if you're doing college sports, and I talked about this in another video, if you're doing college sports and you're putting Division 3 against Division 1, there's a huge difference between the caliber of athlete that is at a Division 3 school and a Division 1. And even if it's on a one-to-one basis, you can say the best Division 3 player could definitely play in that last spot at a Division 1 school. That's true. But when you talk about the team as a whole, the team of Division 3 players cannot compare with the caliber of talent and skill at a Division 1 school as a team. So matching teams up against each other is going to be a much greater than 15% difference. But when you get to the NFL, you get to the Major League Baseball, you get to the NBA, the WNBA, any professional league, top to bottom, the difference between those teams is not that great. You're talking about a 15% difference. So Atlanta is 15% better than Washington. And that 15% accounts for one being at the very top of the league and one being at the very bottom. These two theoretically are 50-50, dead even. How much better is Atlanta than Philadelphia? I don't know. Maybe 3-4% difference, 5% difference at the most between these two teams. Philly wins 63 or 83 and Atlanta wins 97. How much better are they than Miami? If this is 15%, then with Miami, they're probably about 10% better than Miami. Miami hasn't even won 65 games yet. So the difference between those statistically and really when you're making the game, that's what you're concerned with. You're not concerned necessarily with the aesthetics. The aesthetics are going to play themselves out if you get the numbers into a good place. I'm not even going to say right because there is no right. How many one-run games has Atlanta won that they could have just as easily lost and they would be at 89 wins instead of 97? Or how many one-run games did they lose where they could have won and they would be at 103 wins? Okay, so you can't really play like what-if games like that. What you do is you take what is and you try to fix the probabilities on what is, not what is possible, not what could have happened, unless that's the meat and potatoes of the game, is you're reproducing what could have happened. Okay. Uh, that's a whole different thing. That's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to reproduce the teams and the possibilities as they were. And then as they play out on the tabletop, then they play out. But if I get the numbers right and you roll enough games, you should get into the ballpark, pun intended, of what the reality of the season was, whatever season you're reproducing, whatever teams you're reproducing. So this is sort of how that works. And I have one more piece, and that's this. You can see it here. This sheet right here. It comes from this saber.org article that I printed out. I didn't print it out, but what I did, this is from what's called the log5 method from Bill James, and hopefully you can see that okay. And he used this to determine how to determine the winner between two different teams by using their winning percentage. So can we determine a winner, and how, what percentage does one team have over another team? And so you can sort of see that. And I think that when we know that the Dodgers, who are at 688, are playing Washington at 344, the majority of the time the Dodgers are going to win, right? That's just how it is. But can we put some sort of number to that? What are the expectations? What are the percentage of what's the percentage of advantage, basically, that one team has over another based off of their winning percentage? And I've converted that into a D100 roll. So you can see that the greatest advantage is for a team that's at 740 winning percentage against a team that has a 260 winning percentage. Now, does anybody in the majors have a 260 winning percentage? The lowest looks like 360 or 344. Okay, the lowest is 344. So nobody gets below here. So nobody's in here, although I've seen some teams over the years get down into this area here. So the greatest advantage is a 740 win team against a 340 win team, which would be like Washington, right? And then you come down here, and those teams meet at this number. And 1 to 83 would be a win for the 740 win team, and an 84 to 100 would be a win for them. So you can see there's only about a 16 or 17% chance for them to win the game. So this is based off of those log5 calculations that were done. And then I simply converted those calculations to a D100 roll. So you roll same dice that we had before for a D100. And then you find out the winner. So for our Atlanta versus Washington, Atlanta has a 626. So we're going to put them at 620. I like to round down if it's under the mean, because you can see it's in 2100ths increments here. So there's a 620 and a 640. If it goes up to 630, I'll round up to 640. Otherwise, it's going to round down to 620. For the Nationals, they have a 344 winning percentage, so I'm just going to bump them down to 340. And bringing them both down to the numbers below is going to bring them into the right place, right? So that's just kind of how it is. So 620 and 340. And let's say they're playing in Washington. So the way I do it is I take the home team down the left side, visiting team down the top side, and we have 340 is the home team, and we have 620 is the away team, and they meet right here at the 26. So a 1 to 26 is going to be a win for the home team. A 27, where's he? It's here. So a 1 to 27 to 100 is going to be a win for Atlanta for the visiting team. So let's roll out 10 games, and we'll see with this sort of statistical advantage. So here we were just making an advantage of 10%, right? We were sort of guessing at what sort of advantage. Here we have an actual percentage, and let's see if that changes things at all. And then we'll run it with lots of games, and we'll see if the sample size affects anything. So 1 to 26 is a win for Washington. So that's really what you have to keep in mind, 1 to 26. So that's going to be a win for Atlanta. Game number 2, win for Atlanta. Game number 3, also for Atlanta. And another win for the Braves. Braves in game number 5. So they're 5-0 at this point. There's a 12. That's going to be a win for Washington. So they'll get the low number. That's going to be another win for the ATL. And 13, a win for Washington. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 6 and 2. 2 games left. That's going to be a win for Atlanta. and one more. That will be a 28. Our number is 26. And so that's another win for Atlanta. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2 is Atlanta over Washington. So 8 and 2. And you can see that the advantage is fully 75%, right? So 26, 1 to 26 is going to be a win. So a little bit less than 75%. They are at an 80% winning percentage after 10 games. So you're getting pretty close, and we can go ahead and we can test that over a greater length of time by going back into our application. And this time, if it's anything, and we'll use less than, if it's anything less than 26, anything less than 27, that puts it 26 and below. Anything less than 27, then it's going to be a home win, which would go to Washington. Anything greater, otherwise, it's going to be an Atlanta win. So let's go ahead and test that, and we can test our percentages here. And we're running 100 games. So we have 79 and 21. That's almost exactly what we have here, right? So we have 79 and 21. Our advantage should be about 74, 26. That should be about what it is, right? So 74, so that's 153 to 26, which is 48. So 153 to 48 and 79 and 21 again. So that's going to be 12, 12, 13. So 232 to 21, which would be 69. So we played 300 games, and we'll do 232 divided by 300. That gives them a 77% winning percentage over Washington. So that gets us pretty close. And you can see that using something even more finely grained than just taking a shot at a percentage is going to give you an even better opportunity to get there. Because here it was, we played 100 games, so we played 1, 2, 300 games, so 178 divided by 300 gives them a 59% winning percentage, which is right on the number that we did, but that's not the actual sort of winning percentage over the team. This gives you a much more comprehensive look at what would the actual winning percentage be over this team, and you can see that it comes out to a 26, really a 74% winning percentage. So here we play that out over 300 games, we get a 77% winning percentage. So moving into greater detail, and this is just creating sort of a super basic game, right? We're just determining a winner, Atlanta over Washington. Who wins the game? First, we start out 50-50, and you're going to get 50-50 results. But the issue is, unless the teams are actually stacked up against each other, 50-50, if you played Atlanta and New York, your roll is going to be 50-50, right? So if we take a look at these two winning percentages, so if you do 620 and 620, so let's say the Mets are at home against the Braves, and when you come here for a 620 winning percentage against a 620, it's a perfectly 50-50 odd. So you really can just roll the dice 1 to 50, 51 to 100 when two teams who are tied are playing each other, because it's sort of even odds, right? Because they have the exact same winning percentage. Theoretically, not taking any players into account, not taking situations, not taking any sort of details into account, which we talked about in the previous video about details. When you don't take those into account, there's just a 50-50 winning percentage. Now, when you place a good team against a bad team, or two teams in the middle against one another, there's going to be a little bit of a shift, but not much, right? So let's say we take uh, there's a couple Chicago. So 442 winning percentages. They're playing at Wrigley Field, and they're playing against Cincinnati, who's a 380. So 380 against 440, and they meet, and you can see that it's a 50% or 56% chance for Chicago to win that game. So they have a 6% greater chance to win than Cincinnati does, even though they're only separated by 8 games in the standings. So you can see that there's a little bit of an edge, a little bit of a push, 6% between those two teams. Um, so hopefully this helps you to see how moving things just a little bit is going to affect the overall results. Again, you start here, and then as you go out, one team is getting better and one team is getting worse, or they're revealing that one team is better and one team is worse. And at the end of the season, not at the beginning, you can see that even though they're gradually moving away from each other, the more you play, the more it's going to reveal this good team and this bad team, because that's what we're having over here, right? And then how do you determine how far away to start them, a good team against a bad team? Well, you have to look at your sport. You have to look at how many average games are you going to play. You got to look at the luck factor. You know, how close are the teams in the in real life? Are you playing a very good team against a very bad team? Are all the teams basically the same? It just sort of comes down to one lucky play, or it comes down to one great play that you can never determine. It doesn't matter how many times you play, you can't determine it beforehand. So you can't say, well, this team is going to win every time because this guy's going to do this, or this is going to happen, that type of thing. So you're doing your best, and you need to do a lot of role research as you're doing your game. That way you figure out, okay, this is coming out pretty well, right? This is coming out pretty close to real life. Or maybe I need to tweak it and adjust it just a little bit. Maybe it doesn't need to be 1 to 60. Maybe it needs to be 1 to 61 or 2. Or maybe it needs to be 1 to 58. Okay, so tweak it a little bit, adjust it. No one is going to kill you on your numbers. No one is even going to know your engine for the most part. But you know your engine. And if your engine is broken, it's not going to get you to the right place. So you need your engine to be as good as possible. And what they'll see is this part. They're going to see the results whenever they play the game. So if you build the engine well, then when a player gets to the results, they're going to be like, okay, this is within the realm of possibility. I'm cool with that. If your engine is broken, and the Yankees can never lose, which in real life it kind of feels like that, but it's not true. They do lose. They've lost 60 games this year, right? So if they can never lose, people are going to give up on the game, or they're going to talk bad about it because they're going to be like, that's when they come in and say, well, this game engine is broken. The problem comes whenever they played 4 games and then they say the game engine is broken, and you've built the game to be played 162 games. So there is some responsibility on the part of the people. You cannot control that as a game designer, that they talk bad about your game. The best you can do is come back and say, if you keep playing it, then you're going to see that the results come out like they should. Have some patience, have some perseverance to continue to play the game. I built the engine not off of 5 games. I built the engine off of a 162 game season. So that kind of thing, you just got to grow some thick skin, help people to understand how the engine was built. If you want to expose the engine to them, you can, so that they can see the numbers. Otherwise, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. Just grow some thick skin, be kind, and say, how many games did you play? And if they played an entire season and then now it's out of whack, maybe you need to look at it again. Okay, so listen as well. Be humble and listen whenever you're making a game, because you're not always right. You're not going to be right on every team. You're not going to be right on everything. Maybe your rolls are messed up. Maybe you're not using the right kind of dice, and you need a different type of roll. Okay, or you need a different mechanic. So be humble, listen to people whenever they're telling you that something's wrong with the game, but also double check it and before you release it. And then once it's out there, people are playing it the way they're playing it. And so it's just up to you to sort of direct them as to how it's best played. And if they want to play it outside of best practice for the game, then they may get some unusual results, but to continue to play it, and they'll start to see that those results come in line and in focus with what reality is, or reality was, or whatever you're trying to do. Maybe it's just a Yankee homer game, and if you're not a Yankee fan, you're going to get frustrated. But if you're a Yankee fan, you're going to win 130 games, and so that's going to be awesome for you, and you're going to be elated. And it really, the target audience is Yankee fans, not everybody else. So if that's what you're trying to do and that's the direction of the game, then go for it. And then just explain to people this is a Yankee homer game. So if you don't like the Yankees, you're probably not going to like it because they are built to win this game, which would be kind of funny in some ways and frustrating for a bunch of people. But maybe that's what, yeah, that's the draw of your game. That's kind of, I should think about that. That might be a fun game just to make everybody frustrated and angry that somebody's winning. And we'll just make it that the Marlins win every year, which will be very frustrating. All right. I think that's it for this video. I'm certainly out of time, and hopefully that just helps to explain some things. Again, I'm just using the paper, and I built a little roller just for this demonstration, just so that you can see on scale that as you scale the number of games, it should, based off of dice rolls and percentages and mathematics, it should come out to the place that you've set it as far as your scale is concerned. So, keep working on it. Maybe this will spark something in you. Maybe it'll help you solve a problem. I'm not sure. But this is part 3 of a however many part series. I have no idea. I'm just sort of, thinking about what the next steps would be, or what would be helpful or important for designing a tabletop sports game. And this has been a key part for me to understand, is percentages, and really locking down, especially using dice, how manipulating the values for or against a team or a player are going to affect the play, how they're going to affect what type of play shows up. And then, is that realistic? Is that possible? Is it probable? You have to choose how closely aligned to reality you want to get. And then sometimes your engine just has to be out of reality. So maybe the right one is 15%, but as you play it, 10% gets you the results, gets you this part, because nobody cares whether it's 10 or 12 or 15% in your engine. What they care about is, does it come out in the end realistic? And if you have to make this 4% difference so that it comes out realistically based on the scale of what you're doing, then make it 4%. If you're going for reality, you just have to look at the numbers and say, I know that's what realistically and mathematically it's supposed to be if you could play 1,000 games. But if you can't play 1,000 games, you can only play 12. Do I need to manipulate this number out of reality so that this end product can get closer to reality? So that's those are decisions that you get to make it as a designer. Those are decisions that the people playing the game are going to make. And sometimes you build it one way and they play it another way. And hopefully they had the maturity to say, I only played 12 games and I didn't play 100. So that's why, things aren't the way that they were supposed to be. I could see a lucky roll here. I could see something happened over here. And if you're playing a highly undetailed game like this, where you're just figuring the scores, you're going to get a lot of variation. Where you add detail, you're also going to add advantage at every little step of the way, so that that's actually how games are played, right? One person is against another, one person is against a team, and it's in that sort of the detail of every play that the game is won or lost. And it's not only on one roll. So hopefully, as you add more detail, this reality will come a little bit clearer into focus. But if you stay up at this top level, you really got to sort of manipulate those outcomes, manipulate those advantages between the teams, so that over time, over the course of a season, it comes out the way that it should come out. All right. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comments section below. If you haven't subscribed, click on the subscribe button. If you also click on the bell notification after you subscribe, or the bell icon, you'll be notified of new videos whenever they're posted. I will continue to try to get these out as these things come to mind and as I have time to produce them. Just thinking through the process, my own process of designing tabletop games, bringing them to market. I have several games that you can purchase, and I will try to remember to put the links to those in the description below. But I try to keep people abreast of the process. So if you pay attention to where I am on Facebook or on, excuse me, on the Delphi forums, I'm always trying to show you my process, always trying to take in new information from others so that the games can be as good as they possibly can, but also as creative and as different from what's on the market as possible so that people have a choice. They're not just going out and buying the same old game over and over, just with a different name. So, all right, I think that's it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.